Well, it's pretty hot now in Montpellier. That's how it goes. Normally it goes from a nice spring, very mellow, to, you can see, look at the sun, it's pretty hot. Anyway, so I'm a little bit late, but the reason is that they just opened basically the country once more, and not entirely, has been done slowly, as a matter of fact, which breaking with French tradition, which is very centralized, and even it is entrenched in the Fifth Republic of the Constitution, that, for instance, the schools, either they all open or not, they don't at all. But in this particular case, looking at the ground, they decided to divide the country in red zones, green zones, and so on. Where we at here in the south of France has been spared for the most part. Let's knock on wood, but the worst parts are the Grand Est, which is, towards the border with Germany, and of course Paris, and that has to do with a couple of things. One is the concentration of people in urban areas, which is the same all over the world. But anyway, going back to our lecture, which I'm going to do in a couple of chapters, I guess, is I'm going to talk about the Lauretis and feminism. And in that particular paper, it's quite interesting, and there's a lot of things, and it's quite tricky, right? I mean, I am not for one that I believe that for ideological reasons. I mean, there are limitations when a man like myself, I'm straight, male, so talking about feminism may seem a little bit strange, and it should be, right? Because I do have experiences, but I certainly do not have experience of womanhood, I guess. But that doesn't and should not be an impediment for an honest discussion, right, and exchange around even those ideas, as foreign as it may seem sometimes. So here's the thing. In that particular paper, when it comes to feminism related to the concept of identity, the biggest question in that paper, and this is a very, very interesting and consequential thing, is does the concept of women and womanhood is a fixed one? Is it something that we can define, or is there such a thing as womanhood, and by contrast and by opposition as well, manhood? I mean, can we define it? Should we define it? Certainly has been the case, right? I mean, we can define it, and this is depends on the epistemological approach, but you can define womanhood and manhood in terms of biological features, right? Which has been and still is, for many individuals and even some intellectual currents, the way to define it, right? And this goes along with queer theory, and particularly, the experience lived by transgender and so on. So is it a series of biological features that define and determine womanhood, and again, manhood as well? Is it possible? You will see why it's consequential. We will talk about it, but or rather there's something else. Maybe it's not biological, right? And maybe there's a culturalist approach to it too. So women behave in a certain way. No. Before you even, I know that you're thinking about this, is it a social construct? Well, let's talk about this, because that's such a buzzword, and like most buzzwords, they lose power and meaning. So, of course, everything, let's be clear about that, is mediated when it comes to, an exchange like the one that we're having right now, or rather my presentation, I guess. But the ideas that you're having in your mind and these concepts they are exchanged through the use of language, and language is a social construct. Like the easiest and simple way to put this is that language is acquired in the contact with others, in other words, in society. So this idea of the feral, wolf kid is just fiction, right? Kind of like the Book of the Jungle kind of thing, but it's not real. I mean, we do not acquire language unless we exchange with others, and that language, it is linked to the experiences, the landscape, and so on of a group of people. And so actually, not surprisingly, language is a very key feature of culture, society, but also of consciousness. And well, here we go. So let's go back again, since that's hopefully semi-clarified. Can we define a woman, and why is this important? Well, let's put it this way, if we cannot actually, if we decide that womanhood, manhood, social constructs, right, or not, actually. Well, here's the thing, it's either, actually, it's not the same. If we decide that there's something objective, let's put it that way, that can be learned, then it can be recognized in an individual that will deem that individual as a woman, a man, or everything beyond or in between, well then I guess that we fix that particular definition of womanhood and what that means based on those particular attributes. So vagina, women, penis, men, right? That's one possibility. Also can be aggression, men, even, you know, testosterone, men, although women also have testosterone, by the way, and men vary greatly from individual to individual, the levels of testosterone. But are those the features that define men and women? Hard to know. Now, to put it, let me, because I need to make a pause here, and then I will reconnect with you guys again in this video. But think about this, just not long ago, the stepfather of the Kardashians, right? I always forget his, now her name. He's transgender. And at some point, because, you know, when he was an athlete, I guess, an Olympian, when he went into transition, the Sports Illustrated decided to use Caitlyn, I forgot her last name, but Caitlyn, you know, the stepfather of the Kardashians, they decided to pick her as the woman athlete of the century, if I'm not mistaken, and you can, you know, double check on that. But that caused a lot of unrest and protests from certain feminist circles. And there's a reason for it, because, well, they felt, and again, you can do your own research, I can put links, you can go into that, but what you can understand is just basically the women, these feminist groups, and those women that felt offended by that particular idea of presenting a transitioning transgender woman as the athlete, the woman athlete of the year, was basically that, well, here we go again. Now we actually have a man who transitioned into becoming a woman who, surprise, surprise, is selected as the athlete, the woman athlete. So they actually, unwantedly and a little bit, you know, surprisingly, I guess, for them, for the people that made that decision, and Sports Illustrated, well, they were confronted with this thing that I'm discussing with you now, which is, so what is it? I mean, do we need to define it? If it's a fluid thing, then I guess why don't we even use it? Or we use these distinctions, you know, even actually transitioning, transgender, women, and so on. It's not just the binary thing. We're going to talk about it later, but it's not just that. It's just the definition, the distinction. That's how language works, by the way. And there's an entire school of thought around that idea. But it's in opposition to, kind of like in concert, right? So anyway, I went to ponder on that, and I will get back to you. Let me think about all this, but think about it, right? So here we go again. I'm showing off, I guess, my mask. I just need to wear this when you take the public transport, and also when you go into most offices, supermarkets. In some cases, I will say half the cases is not mandatory to wear the mask, but people are basically respecting it. But there's some other instances where it's absolutely mandatory. So anyway, I will show you a little bit my surroundings, I guess. Otherwise, it's just, you know, very boring to just look at me. I will show you. I'm kind of like in the outskirts of downtown, and you can see there's a lot of people. Well, I don't know if a lot, but some people walking around and going around business. Some of them with masks, some of them without masks. So, where were we? Let me go to the shade here because it's a little bit cold. So we're talking about, well, before I continue, actually, before I start, so let's recap a little bit very shortly, though. Most of you, if you have been following the lectures and reading the papers and so on, you should be acquainted with some of the terminology that you even find in further papers, like De Laurenti talks about structuralism and post-structuralism and so on, right? And essentialism too, which is an important thing. So either there is something that we can define, there's something that makes a woman, something that makes a man, and any other category, or not. In which case, I guess that we move into this fluidity and abstraction too. So you need to even forget about this social construct, because like the whole thing with social constructs, and I guess that postmodern perspective is that, well, kind of like Foucault too, by the way, because you were already looking into that. Well, I mean, I'm going to say it simply, but I guess that everything is relative, and we're constantly building categories, and those categories, even post-structuralism, postmodernists will say that, I mean, really, they're the product of oppression. So certain groups, certain powers, right, will exercise, will defend, create, co-create, project certain categories in order to perpetuate their power. And think about Gramsci, think about all the stuff that we can talk about. Now, going back to the feminist take on this, though, and about essentialism, structuralism, and post-structuralism. Oh, there's a little... Oh, by the way, I'm in the Arab neighborhood, the Quartier Arabe here, which basically means that there's a big part of the population in this area, which is, like I said, in the outskirts of downtown, they come from, historically come from northern Africa, Maghreb, which in some cases they were colonies of France, like Algiers. Anyway, you know how it goes. Which is interesting to talk about womanhood and that. So essentially, so is there something that defines womanhood or not? Should we move away from it? Well, here is always a paradox, right? An issue. So what happened, and this is something that in the paper De Laurenti talks about it. So if we think about feminism, the different ways of feminism, and the demands that women through history have made and continue making, right? In view of the injustice that they suffer, which is, by the way, and let me be very clear about this, again, as a social scientist, is of course my duty to do this, but this is not just a perception, it's an actually measurable, quantifiable fact in all societies. Now, not all societies have the same rates of discrimination, and women fare differently in different societies, but universally they actually suffer. They suffered, and you can quantify these many problems. Like one of them is violence, homicide rates, poverty rates. There are health issues and so on, access to work, human rights violations and so on. So, but if we think about the struggle then, and the lack of an essential or a rather fixed or possible way to identify an individual as one or other gender, or again, anything in between, because gender is dépassé a little bit, but in the case of feminism, it's important to say. Then I guess what happened to the struggle? So if you take it to an extreme, that means that when individuals that identify themselves, I'm going into complicated waters here, but that we recognize as women, let's just leave it at that. They complain about these injustices that they perceive society, and particularly men, that would be me, are imposing on them. Well, if there's no real womanhood or a way to clearly define that, and it's fluid, entirely fluid and abstract, then I guess that there's no problem, because then we will have to go into a more, phenomenological way. I mean, every individual, different individuals suffer certain injustices, but it's not that women, I guess, of course, you can argue that it's the idea of women, which again, we go into the social construct. So we created this, which is true, by the way, we created an idea, definition of what a woman is, what they look like, what they do, how they're supposed to act, which, by the way, remind you is the same for men. The difference there, though, as a good Marxist would put, when you apply this, and there's everything emanates from Marxism. Sorry, it's the truth. Social criticism and so on comes from there. But, well, it's in the interest of men. I mean, the definition of these women and womanhood seem to always fare bad or worse than when you compare it to the privileges that men enjoy. However, the problem with the definition persists. Can we actually define then again, women or not? And I'm hoping to run into something, but let me just stop there. It's very abstract, but let me put it into very concrete terms. So, motherhood, for instance, which so far seems to be a oh, this is beautiful. Let me show you this. And here we have an atelier where they work in clavecins, very old piano-looking things. And there's a school here too, which I'm going to show you as well. As you can see here, every school, which for the most part is like 96% of schools in France are public, says liberté, égalité, fraternité. Liberty, equality, and fraternity, which are la devise, the kind of like the pillars, the concepts that are represented in the French Republic: liberté, égalité, fraternité, and they are in every official building and mostly in every school. Sorry that I'm digressing, but you told me that you guys like when I share this with you. So motherhood, we're going back to motherhood and other things. Certainly in the women's struggle, let's just keep it at that again. Let's not go into the details like if I can or not define what a woman is, what women are, or men again. Well, women, motherhood has been central, right, to this struggle, historically speaking. This, again, is a fact. And the reason why I'm looking for something, but I can't find it right now, is that I'm looking for something called la crèche. And la crèche, let me explain to you, is an amazing thing here in France. Exists in other places, but this is central to the idea of égalité, which is the first one that I show you, égalité between individuals, gender, and so on. Other countries have it, and even the States, of course, but they created these places that are actually baby, what do you call it, like child care organisms, and they are state-run. Although they work in the private sector as well, the nounous. And what it is that allows every family, single mother, single parent, it doesn't matter, to ask for a place, and you can actually bring your baby beginning at age 6 months, maybe even 3 months. I forgot, maybe 6 months, because we did it with our 2 kids. And you bring them in, and they will take care of them. There's, in some cases, doctor in the house, and there's nurses, and they take care of them. They're in every quartier, in every neighborhood, they have at least one, because they're, there are public services, and they cost little to no money. Now, of course, this is a relative thing, but it's basically linked to income. So if you make, less money, then you pay less, and all the way to zero, really. And if you make more money, you pay more, but definitely not even close to the average that we pay in the States. Now, why I'm telling you this? Because the importance of that particular institution speaks about what we're trying to study here. This is Jeu de Paume, which is a very beautiful part of town too. And now we are already in, actually this is kind of like the border, one of the borders of downtown. So anyway, let's keep going. Now, why I'm telling you this again? Well, this crèche, these institutions, these daycare facilities, they address a very important issue in women and gender equality, and a socioeconomic fact, which is that women are always discriminated and suffer economic consequences, very real consequences, due to the fact that they are, in pretty much every society, responsible for childcare. So that puts an unfair burden on womanhood. And in order to provide a certain modicum of equality, égalité, France and other countries, they have these particular organisms in place, right? So you're a mother, single mother, or married, then you can leave your kid, they will take care of them. You pay or not for it, and then would allow women to actually go back to work and develop their professional lives and so on. Is this perfect? Not, but it's a huge, huge advance. And And I know that because, well, I mean, again, I'm a man, right? You probably are hating me for saying that, but it's okay. I mean, I thought about it. I may do it. I told you that I'm going to start doing that because now we can actually see people. So interview some women. What about that? You wanted me to interview also because of some of the videos that I posted there and the articles. Black French people, immigrants, I guess, minorities, that's why people of color. It's hard for me to say that because that's a term that is not really used here at all. But anyway, so going back to la crèche, going back to childcare, going back to, you know, the definition of womanhood and manhood, that particular design of like providing free to very inexpensive childcare benefits women. Can we say that? Now then again, that means that, by the way, not only women, because it's entire family and parents, and if you're, I mean, obviously if you're a father, a single father, you of course have access to la crèche as well. But we know that demographically speaking, women are the ones that are actually benefiting from this. And if you care to know, France has, I think that still is the case nowadays. That was like 2 years ago, but the biggest number of mothers or women with children that go back to work. So women actually keep developing their professional careers. Now, keep in mind though that this is not perfect. This is not paradise. Women still make less money than men overall. That's a different thing. Of course, there's sexism here in France too, like anywhere else, unfortunately, in the world. But we're talking about something different here. Are we able or not to define? And even though I know that probably we could talk a lot about transsexuality and so on, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to tell you why, because it's not that it's not important. Actually, it's actually at the core of this discussion. It's right there. I started telling you about this definition thing. Is intellectually speaking, touch that, but it's tricky, right? I guess that the reason why we're not doing that is because that's an entire thing that we will touch later on. You will see, and in the upcoming lectures. But right now, it's all about women, right? But because it's all about women, it's also about the rest of us, all of us. And it may seem like a very abstract and intellectual exercise that may seem foolish even, like who cares about defining a woman? But well, that's the point. I'm going to think about this. It has extremely important, not only intellectual consequences, but political consequences. If there is, whoops, I almost fell there. If there is a way to identify this group as an oppressed group, for instance, well, we need to be able to do it, and we should be able to address those issues. But if we just become, in this description, right, or in this lack of description, just individuals that are confronted in a rather isolated way with not really solid manner to identify certain characteristics, in this case womanhood, then that becomes an entirely different political issue. Anyway, I think that's enough. It's complicated. I know there's always stuff that I would love to talk to. I would like to talk for hours. I'm really good at that, I think. Thank you guys for waiting. I promise to you I will make those interviews soon, you know, with actual women talking about this, right? But it's okay though. Like I said, you might not like this, but I certainly think that we can all have an honest and responsible conversation about these issues. A man about women issues and women about men issues as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to leave you with a view of La Préfecture, which is like the official representative of the central government of France here. And it's getting hot in here. That's the song. Okay guys, I talk to you soon. I will try to connect next week, definitely. Another Zoom meeting. I need to buy something to eat right now, break it home. Take care. See ya.